Hi, I'm Sarah Barrett Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today, as part of our exhibition, Telling Stories, I'm in conversation with Mary Stewart Adams. Every Monday morning at 6:45 and 8:45 on Interlochen Public Radio, star lore historian Mary Stewart Adams tells stories about the night sky and illuminates the connection between the cosmos and the humans down below. Mary uses an interesting approach to this, and it's the humanities, poetry, visual art, literature, and the sciences to tell these rich stories. In addition, she's also the author of the book, The Star Tales of Mother Goose, illustrated by her sister, Patricia DeLisa. Welcome, Mary Stewart Adams.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Human beings, from the Greek to the Anishinaabe, have looked to the stars and night sky and found ways to explain their origins and the behavior of the gods. Today, though, we're bombarded with stories every minute of the day, thanks probably in full measure to our personal handheld devices. Also, the sciences have removed a lot of mystery from human life. Science has provided answers to questions that the ancients once asked the stars to explain. So, with that as context, how do you feel that night sky stories have held up in modern times?
Well, the most important thing for me is to recognize that the human being of today is not the human being of ancient Greece. And there's the introduction of human intellect and ingenuity to bring technologies into our life experience that actually can separate us from the rhythms of the natural world. And you could say, oh, this is a bad thing, but actually this is like an evolving consciousness of the human being. And this is necessary because the goal, at least as it was understood in the way ancient cultures expressed it, was that human beings originate with the stars and come into the physical plane on the earth in order to become self-directing. And if the dictate is always coming from the stars about what one can and cannot do, then you never gain those self-directing forces. So it's as though a full separation has to happen, so that then out of the self, the human being can look around again and say, oh, wait a minute, natural forces, I might want to live in harmony with those. And so the stars are always overhead. They have been from the get-go, since ancient ages. It's not like they've been just, oh, I found a new thing. It's like it's always present, quietly, patiently waiting for the human being to kind of come into a matured consciousness that says to itself, really, the more I emulate the harmony that I see there, the greater will be my harmony in the world. And I believe that I have the experience that star lore and the star stories, because every culture around the world has a star lore, and it's connected to their understanding about the point of origin, becoming human on the earth. It's like a star descends to the earth, and then I unfold my humanness by demonstrating in the worldly environment, in the earthly environment, what it is to be a star, not in any kind of glamorous Hollywood kind of way, but to have that presence, to have that patience, to have that rhythm. And we can, as human beings living in the 21st century, circumvent that rhythm, ride over it. We can stay up all night with our electric lights. We can stay in the cold because we have heat. We have ways to get around the natural rhythms, but the stars are continually there to say, there's this larger rhythm that's always operating. I mean, imagine if the sun didn't rise. I mean, this is a constant rhythm that we continually take for granted, I think. Every day the sun rises, every day the sun sets. We are constantly held in a consistent rhythm that is fully embracing us and not ever once saying, you have to bow down to me.
Well, in relationship to what you're saying, in order to have night sky stories, we need night sky.
Yes, we do.
Intrinsic. So let's talk a little bit about something you were instrumental in bringing about. In 2011, you founded the 600-acre International Dark Sky Park in Emmett County. At the time, it was the first of its kind,
Yeah.
Michigan. What is a night sky park?
Well, I think that depending on who you talk to, the answer would be different. For me, because I come at it from the humanities, I'm not an astronomer. I don't use a telescope. What I'm interested in is fostering a direct relationship with environment, and the stars belong to our environment. We belong to them.
Mhm.
And so for me, a night sky park is a place where a human being can go and experience natural darkness and experience themselves in relationship to this environment. I think in contemporary culture, too many of us don't consciously spend time in the dark. We'll say, we use that phrase, in fact, to be in the dark is to be psychologically unsettled, to be in a place of not knowing. It's usually threatening, but to actually consciously go in the dark as a healthy gesture, that's to me what a dark sky park is. Here's a dedicated environment where the natural darkness is being protected so that you can come and have this experience of what is it that occurs in me as a human being when I am in the dark. Because we have to know that place in ourselves, because in my experience of it, this is where the imagination gets active. And oftentimes it's stirred by fear, but we have to face our fears and we have to allow what wants to come to really be illuminated, but from within, not any external light. Like, how do we find that light of understanding in ourselves? And if we're never exposed to the dark, I mean, certainly it can happen, but if we never go into that place, I think we're inhibited. And in contemporary culture, most people live where they can't see the Milky Way at night. They haven't been taught, or we haven't been taught, the names of the stars, or it's not a prerequisite of curriculum and graduation that you be able to identify constellations, that you know star names, that you know the cultures that name the stars that way, what they meant in those cultures. When we can't see that, when we can't name that, we're being cut off from the cultural history of humanity. And our decision-making processes become different because we're no longer informed by what preceded us that may have exhibited greater harmony in relationship to environment. I heard this really wonderful quote from Gustav Mahler, just yesterday. Tradition is not devotion to ashes, but a continuation of the flame. So if we're cut off from a traditional knowledge, an indigenous knowledge, then we're just dealing with the ash. But to try to continue the flame of inspiration, and when we think about starlight, it is like a flaming light. So it's to awaken that in ourselves, because we do live now where, okay, we can turn on the lights and turn all of that off. Now, how do we turn that on? We got to turn this stuff off, even in in our own thinking, like, let's go dark intentionally, not in a negative way, not in a bad way, but to really recognize the role of darkness in our becoming.
I would imagine the creation of a park, a night sky park, involves a lot of collaboration with local units of government. There's a lot of artificial lighting that keeps the night sky lit. What is it about this particular piece of land in Emmett County that made it a good choice for a night sky park?
Well, you're very spot on by starting by saying it takes a lot of collaboration. The thing that made it that was the relationships between a group of human beings that said, yes, let's do this. So I had been teaching about the night sky. I met a man named Fred Gray, who had been a reporter, but then started working with Emmett County, who said, Mayor, there's a park up in Mackinac that's really dark. The county owns it. You could go do programs there. He introduced me to a woman that was involved with the International Dark Sky Association, which is the organization that protects natural darkness. And she said, you could get it protected. So it kind of developed out of these relationships with one another, recognizing that something was happening that could be quite beneficial. So an International Dark Sky Park is not a guarantee that you're in the darkest place. I don't want to diminish what Headlands is, but it's not a guarantee that it's the darkest place in Michigan. What it is a dedicated place in Michigan where you can go to learn about the night sky and learn about why natural darkness matters. So The best kind of an international dark sky park would be right smack in the middle of an urban environment where you've got a lot of light pollution, but you can enlighten people about why isn't this such a great thing? What can we do about the lighting ordinances and the way we use artificial light at night to enhance our environments? I like to think about how if you go to a play, let's just imagine that the production company doesn't have a lot of money. There's one thing that they can do to change the mood on the stage in every scene. It's the lighting.
Mhm.
This is true in our natural environments as well, in our streetscapes, in our homes. You change the lighting, you change the mood. And so we don't necessarily think about environments where, I feel comfortable, or I might feel, light has a lot to do with how we experience our environment. And so what it required in Emmett County was going to the county commissioners and saying, you have this piece of property, it's naturally dark, we can get it protected. It doesn't cost anything to get an international dark sky park designation, except that there's human power involved. You have to submit an application, you have to measure the light quality, you have to do an inventory of all the existing light. If it's not in compliance with the designation, then you have to say, here's how it will be made compliant, here's who's going to pay for that to happen. So all in all, it took us about 2 years. The process began in 2009. In 2011, we were designated as the first international dark sky park in Michigan, only the 6th in the United States, only the 9th in the world. And I would just like to share that we kind of caught the wave just as it was cresting. And there was so much attention that came toward this. A year later, the state of Michigan passed legislation that protected over 23,000 acres of state land. That's now well over 30,000 acres for its natural darkness. And when the International Dark Sky Association came to their 30th anniversary, they decided, we need to establish an award for International Dark Sky Park of the Year. So this was in 2017. And by that time, where there were probably close to 100 international dark sky parks, it went very quickly. And they gave that award to us at Headlands for innovative programming. And I want to draw attention there because the programming was about the story. It wasn't about the telescope. It wasn't about deep space objects. It was about building a ladder out of human culture to the things that I can actually see just by being human.
That's an interesting part of your approach too, is that you're not bringing in ocular devices to enhance the viewing. I wonder if people find that puzzling at first, because I think we're also used to having, again, more handheld devices and instruments to enhance what we used to do without them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very biased in my answer, right? And I'm speaking about what I do. So this is not I can't pretend to be objective here.
Mm-hmm.
I do consistently have experience, though, of people expressing deep gratitude for having the experience that way because they weren't expecting it. And my intent is really just to kind of lift the veil on what we already know. So it's not coming at you with heavy intellectualism or mathematics or kind of this superlative furthest, brightest, deepest. Let's be right what we can get to, because the telescope doesn't come into existence until the 1600s. There's a lot of human culture going on prior to that time, developing very sophisticated ideas about the motion of the heavens. It isn't until we get to Nicholas Copernicus and Isaac Newton that it's reduced to single motion and a universal law of gravitational force. I mean, this is really simple. But man, what they were doing before that, you have to describe these epicycles and the crossing points. And we could say, they made this much harder than they needed to. But the imagination of the relationship to the dynamic beingness of the universe was so much more alive. And now we are using telescopes, which you could say it enhances our distance, but it's limiting us. We're seeing one thing and not that thing in its environment. Okay, I'm making a generalization. I don't want to diminish the advances of astronomy and the technology, but I think we need to be concerned as a humanity about the decisions that are being made, about what's being allowed, the low Earth orbit satellites that are being launched, thousands of them. I just read an article 2 days ago about a potential process where there are going to be low Earth satellite billboards. I mean, who gets to make the decision about this? I don't want to see an advertisement going through my
Oh,
face.
wait a minute, I've got to interrupt. A billboard is something I pass on the highway.
Yes.
Huge and in my
Set up.
matter of seconds with some sort of advertising message. Is that what's being extrapolated for the project you read about?
Yes. This is very real. This is being very
Huh.
considered. And so the question is, who gets to make that decision? To whom does it belong, that space? And how do we as human beings get to our connection with the planets and with the stars, with the phases of the moon, with the rising and setting of the sun, where, you know, if you don't want to see that, you're having to turn something off further and further. And when we live without a conscious effort to protect darkness, to be in the dark, to think about how we are affecting habitat, what's happening to our energy resources. I mean, there's a lot of issues. The International Dark Sky Association publishes the statistic that almost 1/3 of all light that's used, Earth-based light at night, 1/3 of it is being wasted because it's spilling up into the night sky where we don't need it. And what it's doing is inhibiting our view of the night sky. But more than that, 1/3 of all light over the course of 1 year, that's about $3 billion a year. And we're digging up resources out of the earth to generate the energy, to turn on the lights, and then just throwing it away.
The thing, though, is just looking up at the sky with your own two eyes is not a very flashy experience. And
It's very calm.
trained to respond with more enthusiasm to a lot of that kind of experience. It sounds like there's a lot of competition for the people who would like us to view a billboard on a satellite.
So this to me borders on a discussion about the reality of the spiritual world, because it's as though it's a one-way street. I'm a human being on the earth. I'm in life looking at something.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really take it in to try to live into the idea that the ancients believed, which is that we each of us come from a star, and that not we're just made of star stuff with a star that went supernova, but a specific star that you go back to after you've lived your human life. Like there's an exchange between human being on earth and starry reaches, which are populated by spiritual beings, that when I experience the night sky, it's not just I'm looking out towards something, but something is also looking back. And that if I try to cultivate that relationship, different things can happen in the world. It's not that I'm going to go down to, you know, the local place of governance and picket and say, you can't do that thing. But something will start to happen in my life, potentially in the world, that will inform different decisions because I've engaged something that's living. If I have the idea that it's just dead rocks floating through space governed by laws of gravity, and that there's random asteroid strike, that there's black holes that swallow everything, there's a real violence in the language that describes that cosmic environment, which to the ancients was a harmonious expression of a greater way of being. So it's just a different perspective. And I make it my business whenever I'm in a heavily light polluted environment, particularly in an urban environment, I stop to look and see every star or every planet that I can see, to just allow that, my consciousness, to bring that light, that cosmic light, to that place on the earth. Not with any bravado, it's just I'm going to witness that from right here, because this place on the earth isn't getting that. We're cutting the earth off from its environment. And so as a human being, I can be a conduit for earth to its environment. I can do that. And I believe, I have to believe, that will have consequence in the world. It may be slow, but it's more in line with the fact that the sun is going to rise again and again and again. And I can get into that rhythm. I love this quote from Rudolf Steiner, who was a philosopher and a spiritual scientist that lived at the beginning of the 20th century. The more abundantly the harmony of the cosmos fills the soul, the more peace and harmony there will be on the earth.
It's a lovely thought, Mary.
Yeah. And
It's a lovely thought.
for me, it's like it's worth everything. Like do that, which means slow down, listen within, take advantage of those opportunities. We live in an absolutely beautiful environment in Northwest Lower Michigan where we have these things in abundance. And I feel we have a responsibility for those in the world who don't have access to that, to be awake and aware of those relationships.
If someone wants to read more and they want to get to the Storytellers Night Sky website, how does one do that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long address the first time you put it in, but it is storytellersnightsky.com. And then also, yeah, a separate site for the book, which is just starlore.co. Yeah, and then, yes, you can find me on the Interlochen website as well, iprnews.org.
The Art Center's exhibit Telling Stories may be viewed online at glenarborart.org or in our main gallery through March 23. Mary, thank you so very much for the time today, for your advocacy and your scholarship on behalf of the night sky.
No, it's really my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
And good viewing to all, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.